Well, Pat Collier appeared in the autumn of 1977 when the Soft Boys, we did a show in like the South Bank Polytechnic in London. You could get gigs in polytechnics fairly easily. You didn't seem to have an agent. You could just sort of go in there and impress the social secretary with a cassette and they'd book you. So at that stage, we were based in Cambridge and didn't have an agent at all or anything. So our first single hadn't come out. Anyway, this chap in kind of acid pink trousers, a skinny fox-faced man with a sort of shock of orange hair, sidled up to me and just introduced himself as Pat Collier. And he said he had a studio in London. He had been in the Vibrators, who were a sort of first wave punk band. And I think he just left the Vibrators. And then 2 years went past, and then somehow we had the Matthew Seligman Soft Boys up and running. We had been recording at Spacewood, but Spacewood seemed quite expensive. We could do it very cheaply at Pat's studio in London, which was a 4-track studio, 4-track quarter-inch, so it wasn't high quality, The tape width being narrow meant you weren't getting the same bang for your track as you would on a 2-inch tape. Not that I understand how this stuff actually works, but Pat had this 4-track machine under the arches just opposite Waterloo Station in a place, a very grimy, cryptogamous, damp alley. It looked kind of Victorian. It was just off the Waterloo Road, but it seemed like it was from an age before. And you just had to, there was a sort of big iron portal that was generally shut unless it was open. And if it was open, you could go into Alaska Studios and you'd be hit by this smell of fungus, wood glue, alcohol, tobacco, and nameless bathroom smells. And this was this kind of mastifuge coalesced into the Alaska vapors. And if you kept your gear in Alaska, as I wound up doing after a few years, you kept your equipment in a cage in Alaska, you could then go off on tour somewhere. You might be in California and you'd open your guitar case and the scent of Alaska would spiral up into your nostrils. It was absolutely unmistakable. I had to fumigate my Rickenbacker at one point. Imagine Sherlock Holmes doing that. So Alaska was sort of cheap, scuzzy, gothic, but Pat was really good at mixing a band down onto 2 tracks on quarter-inch and then somehow bouncing the vocals down onto that. So like they did in the Beatles days, when there were only ever 4 tracks, so they bounce down and submix and whatever. Pat was a genius at that, and I don't know whether if you had the same equipment now, you'd be able to do the same thing. I mean, Pat engineered some of our later records. He engineered the Soft Boys Reunion album in 2001, but the sound was markedly different by then. We were digital and there wasn't the spill and all the rest of it. Alaska, there was only one studio in Alaska at that point, so the guitars, bass and drums would all have kind of bled into each other, all the things that posh studios help you avoid. So we went in, and the first thing we actually recorded was the first track on Underwater Moonlight, which was I Want to Destroy You. And I think we recorded 3 other demos that afternoon. Did it, Kingdom of Love and maybe some other things. But the one we kept was I Want to Destroy You. And I remember writing him a check for £30. So I Want to Destroy You, I guess, cost about about £7.5 to make. And there it still is today. It was a good investment.
And when I have destroyed you, I'll come picking
I Want to Destroy You. I remember putting it together and singing it with the band, and Morris and Kimberly came in on that. The staggered harmony. I think as each of them made out what I was singing, they came in with it. But then it stayed, so it became part of the trademark of that song was just the way their voices came in. And there was a lot of paranoia around internally and externally. I was pretty paranoid for all sorts of reasons, but I think if things were swinging back, as they always seem to be, towards the right wing. So Margaret Thatcher had just been elected, and Reagan was elected in 1980, so it's a pre-Reagan song. But I know the Russians invaded Afghanistan in early 1980. There was just a kind of unpleasantly militant sort of, rather like there is today from, the government, the MAGA people and all the rest of it. Nothing like as bad. In those days, the politicians were professional politicians. They weren't mobsters. But it was still, it was still money getting the upper hand. So I suppose that's what was politically going on when I wrote it. But, I could have been writing about wanting to destroy myself. I'm sure I tried hard enough.